So, hello everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Fearless for Freedom. I'm Mariam. I'm a European Community Associate at Students for Liberty and also your host today. And in this series, we explore typically compelling stories of resistance against authoritarianism in Europe and also beyond. And we are bringing these important conversations basically to our students, our alumni, our partners, and everybody who is interested. And today we're talking about Ukraine. Ukraine is a nation that, at least for me and for many of us, continues to redefine what it means to resist and evolve, and also to build a stronger society in the face of this very, very immense aggression. Today, we will explore how ordinary citizens, through self-organization and also this immense determination, have not only resisted an occupying force, but also have effectively shouldered the state responsibilities, creating a very unique model of national self-defense and societal cohesion. Because Ukraine also has shown the world that the resistance and the power isn't just about the military, it is also about the spirit and the innovative tactics. Today, we'll be discussing the current realities on the ground. We will be examining the recent successes in their ongoing fight, addressing the persistent challenges they face. We will be also understanding how they live their day-to-day lives amidst the adversity of the full-scale Russian invasion. And to explain all of this, today we are joined by Adil Abduramanov, a regional development officer at Ukrainian Students for Freedom. Thank you, Adil, for being here and for joining the discussion. Welcome to Fearless for Freedom. I will be passing the torch on to you and asking you my first question, which is to walk us through the context. We cannot talk about the modern civil resistance without touching on the recent developments throughout the decade, on Euromaidan's legacy, the revolution, and specifically how the brutal state crackdown and particularly the violence against the students and the Heavenly Hundred did fundamentally transformed the Ukrainian identity. And my particular question would be how the decentralized leaderless structure of Euromaidan actually contributed to its resilience and success. And has that model been influential to more subsequent resistance efforts?
Sure, happy to be here, and thank you for bringing light to this very important topic, especially in these trying times. Well, when you say that the decentralization and individual initiative contributed to the success of the Euromaidan revolution, or as we like to call it, the Revolution of Dignity, it is an understatement, really, because in my opinion, the decentralization was fundamental to the success. Mainly because, first of all, Ukraine had a large history of showing their disinterest in whatever authoritarian tactics the establishment may try, and so they show consistently that that Ukrainians are not to be trifled with, so to say, because we before the Revolution of Dignity we have the Orange Revolution, and before that we had the Revolution on Granite. So pretty much every 4 to 8 years or so, the authorities do something that is immediately disliked by Ukrainians, and they show it through the civil resistance, so to say. So yeah, because of that, there hasn't been a way for the authorities, for the government to cement itself so as to disparage and become and try to compromise freedoms and compromise the free thought that is all across Ukraine. And because of that, we see that we do not share the same fate as the Russian attempts at some sort of civil protests, because we actually succeeded this, mainly because we already have a history, a track record of successful protest in the past. So that's the main thing. And the second thing is there isn't actually a, a so to say, a centralized one group of interest that rule over everybody else. Usually, it's more of a thing of several groups that may have like situational alliances or situational understanding and unity, but may be complete opponents on different sides of the barricade in the other situations. And because of that, it's very hard to form an authoritarian structure in Ukraine, mainly because there isn't really any like clan or a like singular structure around which you can build the authoritarian regime. Because of that, we also share this characteristic. Not only it's not unique to Ukraine, really. If we compare ourselves to countries that also escaped the Soviet Union, we can see Kyrgyzstan, for example. Kyrgyzstan is pretty much the same. They also have several groups of interest that constantly at odds with each other, and because of that, there's really a big problem to build an authoritarian structure and try to like impose others' will on Kyrgyzstan people. And and they also have a big practice of civil protests to show their determination to putting the country on the right way.
Thank you. It really is very interesting to see how the story unfolds and changes over time, especially when it comes to Ukraine, a nation that really has the history of such a long civil resistance. And my follow-up question to that would be, how has the type of civil resistance changed? Because following the 2022 full-scale invasion, we have seen the strategic evolution in civil resistance, right? A bit, especially in the occupied territories, we have seen that the resistance type has shifted from more overt protests and this mass demonstrations to more covert actions, like we have seen the Yellow Ribbon movement and also the widespread non-cooperation and boycotts. Could you elaborate on how these more adaptive, invisible forms of resistance, such as school boycotts or, for example, refusal to use rubles, have specifically undermined the Russian efforts to consolidate control and absorb these territories?
This is actually interesting because when you try to see that the protest, the unrest shifted to this sort of an invisible approach that is not really seen, it's really non-overt approach. It is not something that is entirely unique to the resistance after the 2022 invasion, because it's using the same playbook from the Revolution of Dignity as well. Because some of the listeners here may not know, but the Revolution of Dignity was not only people standing at Maidan and showing their protest physically. One of the earlier iterations of the protest, when it was not as widely adopted by everyone, was essentially the yellow ribbon, in a way that they tried to tie yellow ribbons across the city on lampposts, trash cans, benches, whatever surface they may find, to show that even though there are not many people around, or there may be no people at all on the street, the ribbons are there. And in this way, people show that they are here. They may not be physically present, but they're mentally present here, and they are not happy with what's going on, and they want change, and the change needs to happen immediately. It's the same philosophy is transferred to the occupied regions currently, mainly because it's really dangerous to show open dissatisfaction with the actions of the Russian authorities, or with the Russian military, especially the occupational authorities, because it's detrimental. It could be detrimental to the life and health of the protester, which is why there is a need to show this sort of a guerrilla tactic to mainly disrupt the processes. I suppose I could divide the activities that are present in the occupied regions into separate activities, like several types of types of activities. The first really large group is the information activities, the intelligence. So essentially, it's a human intelligence, open source intelligence, anything that could be useful to Ukrainian intelligence officials and to the Ukrainian military about the logistics of the Russian military, the sort of the power structures that are present in the occupied regions. So anything that could be used. as a part of the military operation. The other type of activity is the disruption, the diversion tactics. So it may not be as flashy as they may show it in the movies, so like exploding something or setting something on fire. This is also done to some extent, but not as widely popular because it's flashy and it requires a lot of preparation. But it also is really, so to say, unless you know it's there, you don't really understand it's happening. For example, you go to work and you do a mediocre job, or you do the processes that the Russian authorities ask of you really slowly, or you try to show as many layers of bureaucracy you can just to slow things down, and so the decisions get stuck in the paperwork, or it's just in any other like administrative procedures just to make sure it does not happen as quickly as the Russians would like it to happen. It's also a form of protest, and it's something that was widely used everywhere. And using these like distinct types of activities, the Ukrainians are now able to, especially in occupied regions, really show that they are not happy with the way that Russians trample on their homeland, on our homeland, and unless you kill all of the Ukrainians, there will always be dissatisfaction with the Russians on the territory of Ukraine. So this is something that is really important to show right now. And it's actually, well, you shown some context because I've been doing some research on the jus resistendi as like the main philosophy and the main like ideological construct behind the Ukrainian resistance. Mainly, whenever there is a threat to the human dignity and to human life, every individual has the right to recourse. It is something that, well, is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it's something that's usually not that talked about because it's not contained as one of the rights that are specifically said as such in the Declaration. It's hidden inside the preamble, um, mainly because it says, I used to remember it by heart. So to that end, so as to meant not to have recourse against tyranny and oppression, something like this. Essentially, what it boils down to, if there is a threat to human dignity and human life and to any sort of human rights, the individual has the has complete right to protect himself and his family, maybe his loved ones, against such attacks, against such threats. And they may use whatever tools and instruments they may deem necessary, starting from this sort of covert activities and ending at open violence just to protect themselves. It's very important to understand that this is violence in response to violence and not just an initiated violence. So this ties really perfectly with the non-aggression principle usually discussed by the libertarian community across the world.
And I'm very glad you mentioned jus resistendi. I wanted to ask you a question about the right to resistance because it's very interesting how it evolves within the nation as it endures the countless adversities from the attackers. Right now, it being Russia, for example. I have a question. How do you see this evolving identity influencing Ukraine's future trajectory and its place in international community, particularly jus resistendi and this philosophical framework? And also if despite this unifying effect of resistance, there may be some underlying risks, such as like potential power concentration during the protests, which is always a possible theoretical threat in every kind of civil resistance movement or political protest, or also internal divisions.
Well, usually when user resistancy is being discussed, and it's something that we've used in our research as well, user resistancy is used as an argument for gun rights and for gun laws. And because of this, they usually go close together because you can't really have the right to resist unless you have all of the tools necessary to show this resistance. And guns are, well, they happen to be really great tools for resistance. So I don't say this is a problem. It's more like a, a necessary effect of talking about use resistendi. So uh, the if we're talking about the future projections, because I don't like to say predictions, I say projections about what could be possible with use resistendi in Ukraine. I would like to see that the Ukrainians be more considerate and well conscious of the idea that their protection is their own affair. So each Ukrainian has to be able to protect themselves by as many means as they may find useful and applicable to them. So this may not limit itself to the traditional, conventional means of protection, like using the judiciary, like the courts and stuff, but also if it comes to worse, by protecting themselves with weapons. And this is something that's really is a bulwark of democracy, really, because because it's really hard to become a police state, a state that tramples on human rights and to promote surveillance and total control. It's really hard to become this sort of state with the people armed to the teeth. And it's really tough for policemen to use police brutality and to try to impose their own authority on people that are also armed the same, if not better, than the policemen. So it's also one of the parts of the checks and balances system needed to protect democracy, really, and to protect the sort of liberal civilization that we've been trying to build for so many decades, for so many millennia, maybe, really. So yeah, that's one part of it. There also, understandably, there is a risk of power concentrating in some structures that will try to impose their authority on everybody else. However, I try to think that in Ukraine it's highly unlikely, mainly because there are so many groups of interest that may try to concentrate power, and because of that, everybody pulls their own blanket. And so essentially in showing like this sort of like perfect anarchy, in terms like there's no distinct formed ruler, it's really tough for anybody else to become one, because everybody will try to like bring him down to the same level as everybody else. So it's something that we've seen in action during all of the revolutions that happened in Ukraine, because there hasn't been a really one group of interests that consistently protected their own interests and in terms like became the authority. Something like this became the establishment, really. It's always about the change. It's always about people pulling the blanket, balancing each other out. And it's something that's, well, could be used as an argument for a libertarian society, an anarchist society, really, because there aren't really any rules on this. Essentially, if you do not control people on how they protect themselves, nobody really shows violence just because. They only try to do it only as a response to the violence enacted by them. And because of that, everybody is balanced out and just chills out, really. So I think it's not a problem in Ukraine, but it could be in some of the other societies that do not share the same tradition that Ukraine has.
Understandable. I wanted to draw from that and actually ask you if it is correct. What I've been hearing mostly about the transformation of the civil resistance movement is that it has been more and more institutionalized, meaning that bodies like National Resistance Center and et cetera, have changed the game compared to more spontaneous actions in more like 2014. Is this correct? How does it correspond actually to the current reality? And what roles do institutions play in the current civil resistance movement in Ukraine?
Well, if we try to compare it with like 2014 and 2022, because it would be the best way to compare the situations, really. The 2022 situation in Ukraine demonstrated to Ukrainians that unless we try to turn to the mode of total war, there may not be the country to live for Ukrainians anymore, really. So it's essentially an all-in game, and Ukrainians wanted to play that game. They wanted to, well, bet everything just to have the chance of protecting their loved ones, protecting everybody around them, protecting themselves, really. Because of that, the national resistance sort of emerged organically, not as a measure brought from the upper level to the down. Um, so this way, it's an evolving organism, really. If we try to think of the role of institutions here, they try to approach this from more of the educational perspective. It's still a matter of an individual having enough initiative to show everybody else how it's done. So, and it's also a matter of individuals responding to this initiative and saying, okay, we want to learn this. We need to understand how it works. Because of this, this is a really cool practice in Ukraine to bring your friends to like a sort of 1 day boot camp just to understand how to handle a weapon or something like this, how to move tactically, how to use anything that could be used to show resistance if worst comes to worst. Sometimes people use this in terms of preparation for the serving in the military. Sometimes they use it just to have some skills. It's a cool culture, really, because it not only shows that people are ready to protect themselves individually, not expecting anyone to protect them just for nothing, really. But it also shows that, well, it does not need an upper initiative to teach people how to protect, how to show resistance. It's really an organic initiative that needs to be crystallized, needs to be institutionalized to make it work better, not to exist in the first place.
Yeah, understandable. And the Ukrainian civil society, especially in the mainstream media, it has been seen that these movements are the backbone of today's humanitarian response, not just the resistance to the military or physical violence, but also the actual humanitarian response, with which they have, we can say, shouldered the state responsibilities during wartime. Could you share with us some of the examples of how these organizations, like Comeback Alive Foundation, etc., have seamlessly integrated into the national defense and humanitarian efforts?
Well, the volunteer organizations have been the backbone of the military system of Ukraine for quite some time now. It's been the case for 2014 and later, and also most certainly the case in 2022. The difference maybe is that if we're thinking of 2014 up until 2022, it was usually more like a parallel and separate thing unless you're actively engaged with what's happening in the east of Ukraine and trying to, well, think of what you can do, then you participated in this sort of structures. But in 2022, everybody took part, and this showed that essentially we same here. We do not need anyone to bring the structure to us so that we can use it. We can build it ourselves in sort of the spontaneous fashion to do what needs to be done, really. And Come Back to Life Foundation and the Sahib Protula Charity Foundation brought expertise to this sort of phenomenon because they were doing this before. They had the capacity, they had the operational capabilities to manage the large scale supply problem. But it's also a phenomenon of small initiatives. There are plenty of volunteer organizations in Ukraine that do smaller scale donation runs and fund and smaller scale fundraising to target specific units, target specific brigades, or even sometimes to target specific soldiers in the said brigades, just to make sure everyone gets as much resources as needed to effectively oppose the Russian military. It's really a cool system in which there's not really much of a introduced ground rules on how to do it. It's mostly about seeing the trends, seeing the ideas, and trying to make sure that they do not conflict with each other and everybody is working in harmony. So essentially, it's the spontaneous order that is really talked about these days, really.
Yeah, I can imagine that maybe the startup and more like the agility of these Ukrainian civil society organizations allow them to bypass the bureaucratic hurdles and respond more effectively to the urgent needs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's most certainly the thing that led to success of these volunteer organizations. However, it's also somewhat a bit of a curse, mainly because the Ukrainian state does not like when bureaucracy is being avoided, and so, and well, they have their reasons too. They want to at least bring it to some sort of controlled environment to show their idea of safety of this. Um, and they may be true in their intentions as well. However, essentially it creates more problems for volunteer organizations. And if we're talking about like general idea businesses, small businesses that present in Ukraine and with all of the regulations that small businesses face, it's essentially what it boils down to is this small business existing and not existing, which is really an effect on people being more wealthy or less wealthy. With the volunteer organization, however, it's usually a matter of life and death for a certain soldier. So it's a really more serious matter, and because of this, any sort of procedure, any sort of mechanism that tries to slow things down is usually treated with contempt, mainly because, well, they understand what's at stake here. And sometimes it's a really tough balance out there because we try to make sure that everyone works as effectively as possible, and we try to, well, communicate with the authorities to show our side and to see that this is what needs to be done and nothing more. There doesn't need to be more of a system that currently is present at the moment.
And how has the Ukrainian nation faced the burnout? Because from my understanding, the continuous resistance to oppression often leads to people being very fatigued, tired. I'm not talking about like physically tired on the protests and like setting up the plans of like I'm gonna go 2 days and like rest one day and then I'm gonna go 2 days again, etc. I'm talking about like this severe mental fatigue that the Ukrainians, I can imagine, like collectively have to share with each other, and how or with what tactics has the nation persevered, in your opinion? Because it really has been many, many decades that Ukraine has not backed down, especially those who are right now physically in Ukraine, but also from outside of Ukraine. People continue fighting for it and its integrity.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, the fatigue is there. And it's to be expected, really, because 2022 was a sprint. It was a really long sprint, and people were running as fast as they can. Well, metaphorically speaking, of course. And I was one of those people. I remember like the first 6 months of 2022, I think I barely had like any sort of like rest and leisure to indulge, really. I mean, even the first days I barely had any sleep, really. And so did many of my acquaintances that worked with the volunteering and stuff. So yeah, that was a huge problem. And so the philosophy shifted from the sprint to the marathon because Ukrainians slowly began to understand in 2023, really, and at the end of 2022, that this war is going to be really long and it's not going to end anytime soon. And so we need to change our approach so as to not get burnt out that fast, because previously we tried to fit all of the resources as fast as possible, and now it's needed to be more sustainable, be more resilient. Well, psychologically speaking, I think people in Ukraine became a bit closer, really, like in terms of like citizen to citizen, really, because many of us have similar stories to share. Many of us have loved ones and close people that are serving in the military, risking their life, or maybe risk their life and currently, well, sacrifice their life for the freedom of Ukraine. And so this sort of like common trauma, I think, really unites people. And sometimes people forget about this sort of common trauma that really unites and try to show the differences in like really minor details. Sometimes this gets to the point of conflict, but usually it all brings again to this sort of like uniting ground that we all share. So this is like one of the psychological aspects. Um, in terms of like more pragmatic approaches, I think it's the culture shifted really. I mean, I've been to my school recently, the school, the primary school I graduated from, and I remember I remember the way it was in 2018 when I graduated, but then I came in 2025, and I've seen that it didn't really change for much. However, there were a lot of flags of the brigades, flags of Ukraine with the signatures of the military, like showing their thanks for the support, for their support, for the school's support of the military. And so the culture really shifted like in the small details as well. I tried to reflect on this when I was walking back from my school because, well, it's something that I've seen for 11 years and it completely changed with like the small points of interest that completely transformed what the school was all about, the entire atmosphere inside, even though there wasn't any real like fundamental changes to it. So it's the details that matter really. And so like some of the pragmatical things that were present. If we're talking in terms of like political stuff that happened, um, it's really great to see local governments work with the policy of memory, the memorial policies. There have been really cool initiatives done by local governments that well satisfy the need to pay respect, to preserve the memory of the fallen soldiers. And it shifted from this sort of like Soviet Union idea of like almost sanctifying the heroes to some, and in the same fashion, not using like the saint and sacral sort of thing towards the fallen soldiers as well. But I think we became closer to the European tradition in in this respect, and maybe even touched like the more traditional Ukrainian approach towards honoring the fallen soldiers. So I think it was really a point of coming back to our roots and understanding that we are here, we are part of Europe, but we also have our own thing, and everybody else that tries to like ruin this thing and to create something new that does not belong to us, is not natural to Ukraine, um, gets shifted to the peripherals and maybe just became shifts to the margins unless and up until it does not exist anymore in like the mainstream culture.
Okay, thank you so much. But I want to downscale the resistance now a bit, since you mentioned that decentralization is the pivotal uh, uh, attribute to this resistance movement. I want to narrow it down and just talk about your NGO and what is your day-to-day life in the face amidst this occupation and war. Has it influenced your role, your mission, and also because the civil society is a very big thing right now in Ukraine? I just want to touch on the NGOs, maybe not just yours, but like what would a day-to-day life of an NGO look like today in Ukraine?
Well, I think our NGO, the Ukrainian Students for Freedom, is not that different from in terms of initiatives they show as other NGOs do. Uh, so to better illustrate my point, I currently have like three messages from these three separate people that to not really talk to each other. They may not be like close friends or something, but they said, "Hey, I'm doing this really big fundraiser. Would you like to be a part of it?" And they have three separate brigades, three separate units to like raise funds for. So it's really well, the fundraising and this sort of like supporting the military thing became a strong part of the culture inside the NGOs as well. It's something that we do regularly. It's something that we do passionately. It's something that we show a lot of creative ambition towards. So if we have any ideas that would be well, useful for us to raise more funds and to help the Ukrainian military more. We try to develop those ideas as much as we can. So starting from like charity auctions and ending in like I don't know social media campaigns to like better promote the fundraising thing. So and it's not really an organization thing in principle. It's me. It's also a thing of individuals. It's one person having the has the idea to do something cool that will help the Ukrainian military, and we all try to jump in on the bandwagon and to support, develop the idea further, maybe develop it in scale, develop it in complexity and stuff, and it becomes this wonderful thing that unites people and shows them the power of cooperation, of voluntary cooperation even. It's the same in the cooperation between NGOs as like entities, separate entities as well. I would not think that there's like a really huge demand for like this one platform or like one big umbrella organization that will unite all of the non-governmental organizations in Ukraine and finally show like the true united path. It's usually a matter of bilateral cooperation, really. It's like what I really like about the civil society, like sector, civil society scene in Ukraine is it's really a matter of individuals. Like, hey, I saw you doing something like this. It's really cool. We can do something together. Could you be interested in that? And it's usually brings you towards more enriching experience than just doing things yourself. So it's something that is really hard to distance yourself from. I'm gonna miss when I will stop working in the non-governmental sector as much as I work now. I'm gonna miss this thing really badly. But it's also, I think, is the main principle on which the civil society really stands in Ukraine, that anybody can do anything. And usually in cooperation, they reach this sort of synergy that makes them reach more and do more than they could do individually, even as a sum of their effort.
And how do you think we can ensure transparent and more locally led reconstruction for Ukraine also, and to make sure that it is not becoming more and more centralized in the future once the peace is reached? And we all hope that it will be as soon as possible, but we don't know, right? And how can we make sure that the CSO's expertise is actually fully integrated into the recovery frameworks? And also, what is the most urgent need right now from our international partners to achieve this? Because I can imagine there are probably some challenges about international funding and like ensuring local leadership right now.
Well, I think my advice, like my sort of pitch for this whole thing would be to think small. Really, because many people try to think big and saying, okay, how can we make our idea bigger? How can we increase it in scale, increase it in complexity, bring more people together, be useful to more people and stuff like this. At some point, we need to really focus on something small because usually it's the details that people forget about and it's the details that matter. The reconstruction efforts may be cool in like capital cities like Kiev. It could be really big on large million people cities like Lviv, like Kharkiv, and like Dnipro, something like this. People may forget about smaller towns and settlements that also suffer from the military aggression of Russian Federation, and usually they don't really have the resources to do it themselves, and but even then people tend to forget about it really because it's not on the news as much, so it's really a matter of thinking small in terms of like international cooperation. Well, the knee-jerk response to the question what can we do is like for bring more support to Ukraine, be it humanitarian, monetary, anything that could be used to repel the Russian aggression. However, it's like the easy response. The harder response would be talking about Ukraine and making sure the Ukrainian topic is not forgotten across the world, because it's not really a matter of Ukraine like individually, and that's it. It's essentially a discussion of on the question: are liberal values, the ideas of freedom, valuable enough to sacrifice your own life for? And well, Ukrainians try to answer this question every day, and consistently show that freedom is the best. Freedom is something that could be that is so valuable. People sacrifice their lives for it, and it's something that needs to be shown consistently to everybody else. Because if we are not fighting for freedom, then why are we doing this?
Thank you so much for a very touching finish to our conversation. I would wrap this up here. I would definitely continue talking about the reconstruction of Ukraine for another hour or two, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would still ask the audience if they have any questions, but in the meanwhile, I would remind everybody that we will actually be talking more about the reconstruction and Ukrainian Renaissance on July 4th to 6th in Lviv, Ukraine. And if anybody is interested in joining, the event is live and they can register. We would love for the internationals to join the conference. If there is any questions from the audience, please ask.
Yeah, do it. I mean, I'm here to answer all of your questions. And if you're not able to think of any questions right now, be sure to come to Lviv for 4th to 6th of July to ask these questions in person. I'm gonna be there. I'm not gonna leave unless I answer all of your questions, and you're not able to leave as well.
I don't
Uh,
think we do have any, but that means that all of the people are joining for. Yes, this video will be live on YouTube.
oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
yes.
I'm
So
not sure.
that this probably means that the people will be asking questions live in Lviv.
Okay, do it. I'm gonna see you there. If I'm not gonna see you there, I'm gonna be really upset with you. Yeah, but this video is gonna be on YouTube as well. I'm not sure if you
Yes.
have the same saying in Georgia, in Ukraine. Whenever we like see something that will be like published on YouTube, because I'm not really used to being like a YouTube person. We say, "Okay, Mom, look, I'm in television. I'm on TV."
Yes, we
I'm
do. I think that is very universal to the
yeah, perfect. Yeah, cool.
to all the nations. Thank you so much, Adil, once again for the very insightful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully, your audience enjoyed it too. Once again, the reminder that we will be coming to Ukraine in Lviv on July 4th to 6th. To go to ukrainianrenaissance.org to get the tickets, and hopefully we will see you in Lviv.